everybody. Welcome to the Ryan Stick Show, a special look at the Guardians of the Galaxy video game. I am joined by more guests today, and I'm bringing them right now. Hello, everybody. How's it going?
It's good. Hello.
Good, really good. Hi.
All right, Mary, Kasper, I'm going to ask you one at a time to introduce yourself, what your position is in the making of this masterpiece, and a little bit about your job. So, Mary, let's start with you.
Okay. Well, I'm Mary DeMarle, and I'm the executive narrative director at Eidos Montreal on Guardians of the Galaxy. That put me in charge of the narrative and the story development and leading the writing endeavor.
Excellent. And Kasper, please
My
me with your super sweet headphones.
that work now. My name is Kasper Hartman. I was the lead game writer on Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. My job 93% of the time is to do what Mary tells me to do, and then 7% of the time push back and not do what she tells me to do.
I think it's a little more than that.
Yeah, maybe.
Gotcha. Mary, you got to tell me, because I looked it up when Jason Calvier, my good friend who hooked us up, told me I'm going to be speaking with the narrative director, and this person is winning awards, and this is just amazing. And I'm like, that's awesome. What the heck is a narrative director? So I Googled it, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of stuff. But then on IMDb, it just says writer. But Kasper, you being here proves that it's not just one writer, of course. There's many people that work in this. Mary, tell me exactly what a narrative director is.
On a game, the narrative director is in charge of the narrative of the story. Generally, you're working in a game, you're working in a collaboration with a team of directors who are most closely. I'm working with the game director, who would, I guess, be in the equivalent of a movie would be your director. And my job is to work very closely with the director and come up with the story for the game, work very closely with the gameplay people to make sure the story is matching the gameplay and being told through the gameplay. Working with the art directors and all that to make sure they're translating this story and vision, and then working with the team of writers to ultimately write the scripts, write the dialogues, write all the texts that are in the game, and basically how is the story being implemented in the game.
Excellent. Okay, so before I even had a chance to play this game, I knew that A, my buddy was Drax, which was cool, but B, people were praising the characterizations, the stories, the emotional depths that they would all go to. Really, besides beautiful graphics and amazing gameplay, that even a guy like myself who is not amazing at video games can definitely rock great control system. The writing in this game is so damn strong, and I was speaking with Daryl Purdy before, just about the beginning of the game. Like, instead of a big splash page explosion, it's a 13-year-old Peter Quill listening to music in his bedroom and having a conversation with his mom about how she liked Black Sabbath and having a little bonding moment, and knowing enough that Peter Quill is essentially the Bambi of this story, that horrible things are going to happen later on, but living in a moment and just kind of like being validated as not only a superhero fan, but a game fan, and just being like, they trust me enough as an audience member to sit through this ride and to listen to all this and to say, you're smart enough and mature enough to appreciate something this deep. And I really appreciated that. But coming up with this and writing all this down and putting yourself out there to make a game like this, it's quite a feat. Tell me when Guardians of the Galaxy first came into your lives. Like, did you know you were going to go in this direction and really hit all those emotional marks, as well as being so hilarious?
No, I guess I would say no. When did Guardians come into my life? I think it came to my life the same time as a lot of people with the first movies, but never did I think at that time that I would ever be working on it. When it did come into our lives, we approached it like we do every game project with the creative director JF Degas and myself and the team of directors. We were like, okay, let's understand the heart, the essence of this license, because we didn't know what kind of a game we were going to make. We didn't know. And I will admit, me personally, I said to JF, you want me to write comedy? Are you kidding? This is like the hardest thing in the world. But thankfully, I had people like Kasper, who could kind of help me get through that.
Gasper, any thoughts? I mean, come on, the heart and hilarity that this game is made of is palpable, to say the least. And I'm so glad that capable and brilliant people like both of you were working on this. But Gasper, tell me how you got into the Guardians of the Galaxy video game world.
Mary told me to write it, so I wrote it. I mean, at the start, I think for both of us, for me, the very first red flag or concern was I had never worked with a big IP like this before. We had come off a project
Of
where we were
course.
making our characters, developing our themes, our storylines. So there's a lot of level of control there that we have. And so right away, the first terror, all of the production phases of making a game for me, they're demarcated by moments of terror. So the first moment of terror was how are we going to have a relationship with Marvel and Disney and still feel like there was some level of creative control?
Hmm.
Um, at the first experience that I remember was just being asked to write the audition scripts, which, there's something weird and silly about that, having to write audition scripts for characters that are so well established already. There's already 1,000 audition scripts probably out there, because these characters are known and they're in the cultural fabric. But what became pretty apparent early on with the Disney guys and the Marvel guys is they trusted us. They wanted us to kind of explore our take on these characters. They wanted us to
Hmm.
come up with our own, our own looks, our own audition scripts, our own voices. And so that was the second moment of terror, realizing that, oh God, they do trust us. Now we actually have to do it.
Yeah,
And
and you're totally right about that. I mean, it was really great how Marvel basically said, as long as you understand the essence of these characters, then we want you to make them your own. We want you to come up with an original story and put your slant on it. And that was, I think, both terrifying, but liberating at the same time.
For sure, and quite an original take on the characters it is. I mean, anybody could have just done some pale imitations of a well-known franchise, kind of, coasted on the fact that everybody likes these movies and just said, "Okay, be like Chris Pratt as much as possible." You could have did that, but you didn't, and I'm so glad you did um, go the way you did because I'm in love with this version of the characters. I haven't rewatched the movie just yet because I don't want the taste of these characters to leave my mouth or my brain, if that kind of makes sense. Because Peter Quill is much more of a metalhead in this one, and I really appreciate that. I love the fact that you got to tell me, how did it come to you that StarLord is his childhood favorite band, and that's why he calls himself StarLord? Because that's such a brilliant idea.
That came again out of the core group of directors. I think I believe it was JF. It could have been Steve Shipkowski. It could have been one of the other directors, but they were just like, when we were talking about it, how can we differentiate it? One of them was saying, well, what if it's a band, and the core directors, JF, many of the directors, they're heavy metal fans.
I mean, the metalness is 100% JF. That's all I see when I see that aspect of Star-Lord. But then I think what I love about the game we've made and the characters we've developed is that I see so many aspects of different people and different types of people in the characters that we made, where I think it helps to kind of sell that sense that they're alive and that they're dynamic, that they're hard to pin down. I think sometimes throughout the game they might surprise you with some of their reactions to situations, the way that real people surprise you. And it was, it's not something we knew how to do right off the bat. You don't just have a template and a series of bullet points for how to write the perfect version of our own Guardians of the Galaxy. It was very organic, and it was just trusting ourselves, but also trusting the characters to kind of evolve over time with us. Yeah, and even we made it, but I play the game and I hang out with them, and I forget sometimes that they feel like real people. It's like I'm hanging out with real people, and that was the main mandate right off the bat from core direction and from Mary, was we want an experience where you feel like you're hanging out with the Guardians. That was the key phrase that we kept hammering over and over again. And so, to do that, we needed to make them feel as organic as possible, as realistic as possible.
Playing this game, I kind of felt like I was in good company the entire time. And it also reminded me of being in a band when, let's say, your bass player's a little grumpy and your drummer's pissed off and all that kind of stuff. And it's up to you to kind of go to each of them, kind of take a little knee a little bit and kind of talk them through it. And I love the fact that in this game, you could either be very nurturing to them or a dick, and you give them this option. How did that come? Was that always going to be a thing where you're like, well, you can make the situation better or worse?
It was all, I mean, part of the DNA of our team and our studio is choice. And every game we've worked on, we always want to give the players choices. And we're always trying to make those choices meaningful. I mean, it's not just that, oh, let's just have fun with different things. But on this one, I think we did give ourselves a little bit more room to play and to say, to make the choices of, well, what would be a way, what would be a good differentiation in the conversation. So it kind of comes from that, I think. But I think Kasper can tell you a lot more about how you write that stuff.
I mean, the first conversation I remember writing for the game was probably the encounter with Lipless in the bar, which was never even intended to be part of the game at all. It was kind of like a proof of concept that we made as part of our first playable, just to test our cinematic pipeline, our writing pipeline. And just in the way that I approached it, I mean, really the template was the way that we wrote debates and persuasion sequences in Deus Ex, where it's this series of minimum 3 rounds back and forth where you have choices through dialogue in order to try and find something out or win something, attain an objective through dialogue options, some of which are better or worse. And very quickly we kind of realized, the difference between a Deus Ex experience and a Guardians experience is Deus Ex is much more pondering and philosophical. You really have the time to analyze your options and think it through and what's the best strategy. Guardians is much more of a roller coaster. It's just things are going to fly off the rails and we keep going. There's no going back. There's no save scumming. You're along for the ride. So one of the early things that we changed with the way we approached conversations was, instead of having these locked fixed sequences where you have infinite amount of time to make a choice, in some of these more like battle of wit sequences, like with Lipless in the bar, it's going to be timed and the pressure's on. And yes, there are good options, and yes, there are bad options, but you're going to power through no matter what. And so it's just kind of like finding that, we already had the template for how to write these conversations, how to build them, but it was more about the challenge of finding the right tone, speeding it up, making it more about fun rather than, philosophical insight or reading of psychological profiles. It's more just, you're along for the ride, and no matter what you pick, you're going to have a good time.
What's interesting about that too is that I know that in a lot of choice-based dialogue games, people tend to, some players get all like, I want to choose the good thing. I want to be good to the team. I want to choose that option. But on this one, especially with the Gardens, I've seen comments from players in which they said, normally I do that in games, but on this one, I would choose what looks like a really bad one because I knew it was going to be funny and it was going to go somewhere interesting. So that was a differentiation, I think, in how our choices get made too on this game.
I love that so much. And Casper, you were mentioning how like different the characters are, and how I noticed right away, just being, I'm 37 years old, and I remember just, when I was a kid, it pretty much was just everything was a button masher. If it wasn't Zelda, it was pretty much, or an RPG, it was pretty much just push A until they're all dead. And what I really appreciate about this is that choosing to just have StarLord be the playable character, but always having access to the other teammates, it's almost kind of like you're implementing those strategy games from RPG, except you're not kind of waiting for everyone to go in a row. I really love the fact that all the Guardians mattered, and what they bring to the team matters, and their skill set matters. And when someone quits or someone's mad or someone goes away, you really, really feel that not only is your friend gone, but a pivotal member of the fight is gone as well. How was that decision come about? Because that's very unique, I find.
I think it came out of the original concept time that we spent in understanding the license, and in understanding the license, I think Kasper mentioned one of the first things we really hit upon was we want to hang out with these guys. We really want to build a game where you feel like you're hanging out with them. Once we knew that, every decision we made had to tie back to that. So not only do we want it, that led to them talking all the time, being with you all the time, walking with you all the time. And in combat, making it feel like you are directing them, you are, and you definitely need them. So it all came out of that initial design meetings that we had at the very beginning before we even had a story. And everything kind of filters down from there.
I love to think of it. It's less of a superhero simulator, and it's a leadership simulator. I mean, StarLord, his
Big
superpowers
difference.
are these characters. It's his ability to bring them together because each one of them individually, they're so strong, but they're so volatile. And once if he's able to live up to himself and get the best out of himself that he can, that means he's going to get the best out of the group. And he's the one person that can do this, is make them feel like a team. And that's where the superhero power, I think, comes from to some extent. And so it's the way I kept imagining StarLord, is it's really, this is his superpower. It's not the blaster, it's not the jet boots, it's his ability to get these guys to work together.
I love that. And my favorite scene in the MCU Marvel's film Avengers, back right before the Battle of New York happens, like things aren't going well, and Steve Rogers essentially Tony Stark says, "All right, Captain, what do we do?" And he's like, "All right, Thor, you go in the skies. This, that. All right, Natasha, we're going to keep the fight on the ground." And Hulk, smash. And I'm like, and the way I felt about that is the way I felt about this entire game. I was so happy. I was so happy when I started playing it. First of all, because Jason Calvey is my buddy, and I was like, it's going to be really awkward if this game sucks. So, but I downloaded the because I have a Nintendo Switch, so I downloaded the demo, and then I bought the cloud version. I just was just like, oh my god, they talk to each other all the time. This is exactly the way my friends and I would bust each other's balls when playing Double Dragon. Like, those characters didn't talk to each other, but your friends would kind of, like, if you screwed up or you went somewhere else, or you're walking into a wall or fall off a cliff, someone would tease you. How, like, Rocket, for instance, has such an interesting arc where in the beginning he's kind of a little jerk, but by the end, and spoilers, kids, he says something very sentimental in one of the final battles, and I'm like, wow, that is an arc. Did you have all these character arcs planned in advance, or did it organically happen through the process and you kept changing it, changing it, changing it?
God, no. It's a challenge and a debate that we had, I think, among the writers and among the team. I remember very early on was worried about that aspect of Rocket's character, because we knew that we wanted you to want to hang out with these characters. And we knew that sometimes Rocket could really like take it to level 11, 12 in terms of his, how aggravating he was. So it was something we were very aware of and concerned about. I think Seknarf 9 is one of the first maps that we really wrote from start to finish in terms of all the banters and all the scenes. And it's not a map that Rocket is particularly happy to be in.
Hmm.
So right away, that kind of set the tone for the kind of character we were working on. And then all the stuff about, absolutely, we were aware that we wanted to make an arc, and we had so many meetings together with Mary and the writers about trying to identify different arcs for the different characters. And I think things kind of come to a head for Rocket in Lamentus a lot. I mean, the honest answer to your question is it's extremely organic. It's part of the way that I think Mary and I have learned to work together, and something that we've tried to cultivate in the types of teams that we build is we're not going to have all the answers from day one, but we're going to trust each other. We're going to be open with each other. We're going to write 30, 40 versions of these scripts until we get them right. We had an extremely collaborative writer's room where it wasn't just writing scripts and sending them to Mary and sending them to Marvel and sending them to legal. We went through iterations amongst each other. We gave each other very harsh feedback, very honest feedback. We read the scripts out loud together over beers every single Friday, trying to find the characters. In the process of that, yes, we're writing better and better scripts, but we're finding the characters through that, and then always trying to adapt. And I think Rocket's arc, it came out of that. It was, it's very much an organic development process.
Oh, amazing. There's a scene that Rocket has that broke me a little bit, gotta say. And it's near the beginning of the game, kids. So in this portion of the interview, it is not yet spoiler territory. But they're going to see, for their latest scam, they're going to go see Lady Hellbender, and they get stuck in this jelly. Now, Rocket is not as tall as everybody else, and he's starting to drown Now, later on, Rocket and fear of water and drowning is going to be a huge part of this game. And I gotta say, everybody, if you have not played this game yet, go do it. You will feel better about the world. Trust me. But Rocket's not as tall, and he's going under, and it's really funny because he's always has this animosity with Quill, where he's always kind of saying "my ship," this, that, and always giving him crap. But when he's drowning, he is calling out to Quill to save him, and because I'm such a crappy game player, I had to watch him die about 9 times before and it's an easy mechanic. It is good. It is well. If you are good at video games, you will get it right away. But I am me. So unfortunately, with the stress, I was trying to save him and I had to keep watching him drown and his little hand is up there and he's whispering Quill and it's such a beautiful performance. Can you tell me about coming up with what I consider the equivalent of the never-ending story watching the horse drown?
I don't know the story. I don't know if I can remember the story behind that. I mean, obviously, it all tied into again, spoiler territory. It all tied into the one of the evolutions of Peter's character with his relationship with his gun, and that had, you know, we kind of always knew that we would have these moments where the gun would transform because it would pull on some need that Peter had to save the members of the team. And so, and we also knew that each time it would involve at least a different member or maybe the whole team, or et cetera, as we go forward. And we had pegged early on in the story that the first one would be with Rocket, and it would be in that moment where you have to save him on Seknar. As for the never-ending drowning, I sympathize with you because I had the same problem. And sometimes I had the same problem because there are bugs in the game and you just can't get it to work. So that's as far as I can remember the evolution.
Yeah, it's exactly it's really it's an example of 1,000 times over the course of production where we have, you know, we're trying to solve a design problem in the right narrative way. Like we knew we wanted StarLord to be able to have different types of ammo. You know, that's key to the core gameplay experience in order to have these, you know, evolving abilities for StarLord. How do we tie that into something that makes sense narratively, character-wise? And so just trying to come up with something where, you know, it's part of StarLord's DNA and it comes out of him without him being fully conscious of it when it's a moment of crisis, when it's the moment where he needs it the most. Something in him kind of senses this, and then tying that to, well, the, you know, the love that he has deep down for each one of these characters, that it's not about a moment where he has to save himself, it's he has to save one of the other guardians. And so trying to figure that all out, and that design aspect, it's again, that's a big part of what we do with Mary, is just trying to like not just write scenes and make sure that the scenes work well in game, but kind of having an overview that, you know, the cohesion narratively, that the narrative integrity is there for every aspect of the game.
It's interesting because before I even played this game, I knew that Drax had some crazy deep backstory stuff happen in this game. I just knew it, just based on all the articles that I was seeing coming out of the woodwork about Drax's backstory and how and the performance that Jason Calvier did.
Amazing.
And what's interesting is it was brought up to me just before by Daryl Purdy that if you don't find Drax in a certain part, you won't even see this particularly beautiful piece where him and Quill are staring at the edge of the universe. And and before our interview, I just watched it before. So it's like this wound is fresh, you can say. And it's absolutely amazing, amazing dialogue. Can you please tell me about, and spoilers of kids, it is right at that time. You played the game, you finished it, you want to know more about it. We're talking with the writer, we're talking with the narrative director. If you haven't played the game yet, please feel free to pause, change, or whatever, because we are going to tell you about Santa right now. Okay. Tell me about writing the scene where Peter and Drax are talking about their lost loved ones and their beliefs, where they come from, where people go. Tell me all about this, because this is kind of this is another level of storytelling, and it happens to be in a video game, which is beautiful.
one of the things you have to understand first about game writing is you don't necessarily go into production with a finished script. You're writing it as you're producing everything, and a lot of times you're writing things out of order. So we were writing that particular scene is a cut scene or a cinematic, and the cinematics were on a different schedule for the creation of all the levels. So sometimes we're like kind of going, oh, let's hope this works. Let's write it and see and whatever. And so that one we knew what we need to have a moment where Peter, and if the player is discovering it, if the player follows Drax, if the player finds Drax, and as you said, you can totally miss it. We knew we wanted a moment where these two men could sit and connect about, and we knew that Drax in his mind was dealing with his deep family issues and the loss of his family. So we wanted a scene where Peter could meet with Drax and kind of dive into that. That was pretty much all we knew going into it. And then I assigned it to one of the other writers on the team, Jocelyn, and said, okay, let's come up with something. Just come up with something, Jocelyn. And remember as well that one of the things that we're dealing with thematically here is the concept of grief and stuff. So Jocelyn took a stab at it, did a wonderful job. But, then as we went through different iterations, I was saying to her what I wanted those choices to be. And it's very, very subtle, that if you really understand when someone has lost someone, listening is a huge part of it. So in one of those choices, you can choose to listen more to Drax, or to kind of talk about your own problem, your own grief, your own whatever. And doing so actually ends the conversation in a slightly different way, and a slightly sad, like basically, let's say that if you listen to Drax, you get that lovely reward at the end where he says to you as you're leaving, the line about your mother. I'm trying not to spoil, even though I know that you just gave this great spoiler. And so a lot of it was just working with Jocelyn and going through multiple drafts, and doing our, and actually looking into psychology of grief, psychology of how to handle people who are grieving, etc. But that all the psychology was on my side, giving her that insight, as she just came up with this beautiful and incredible scene.
There's 6 writers on the project, and I think and this is an example of a scene that I didn't even have eyes on this scene until it was pretty much finished and produced. So my reaction to it was very similar to your reaction, as that of a player who's experiencing it for the first time and saying, wow. And I think it's one of the challenges of writing for a game that's this big, is that we have multiple writers working on multiple things at the same time. As much as possible, we're giving each other feedback and keeping each other in the loop. But the person that we really rely on to make sure that there's cohesion and that it's all coming together is Mary. She's the one that has the overview, and she sees it from a higher level than we do. So it's a challenge. We really want to avoid the sense that you don't want the player to see the clear demarcation between, oh, this writer wrote here and this other writer wrote here, and it's a drop off or a stylistic change. And at the same time, we also want to embrace the fact that we are different writers with different quirks, different styles, and kind of, embracing that rather than suppressing it, in order to, again, make the characters feel like they're shifting and they're changing, and they're not always going to be predictable. They're not always going to be one note. It's not a 2.5-hour movie. It's a 20-hour experience. And so you want that sense of unpredictability a little bit. So that moment with Drax, for me, I was... I watched it the same way that you watched it, and it blew me away. Absolutely.
Okay, so this script for this choose your own adventure, technically, space adventure, must have been the size of a phone book, because this is the most talking I've ever heard in any video game ever. And there's a lot of funny personalities come out, but not only that, I mean, it could have been like one of those talking dolls where when you pull the string, they say 4 things max. There's an evolution to these characters, which is fantastic, where after you wake up from your dream after seeing your mother, it's pretty much Drax telling you you're about to go on a mission, and he doesn't trust Gamora. And throughout the game, you kind of see them all slowly bond and really come together. And I loved the huddle. I loved it so damn much because I kind of like being the Ted Lasso in space and give all these really inspirational moments, because I got just as psyched as they are when that 80s like soundtrack kicks in, and a battle you're already fighting gets even that more exciting. Tell me about, like, your favorite evolution that a character had with another. You know what I mean? Not just their own personal one, but they particularly this person bonding with this person. Because I gotta say, the Rocket and StarLord thing, that's my jam. I love that.
I don't know. It's so hard to choose favorites. Certainly, the Drax and Gamora one was one of the clearest ones for us. Although, because we knew, like, as you pointed out in the beginning, he's calling her murderous and he's doing all this, and then in the end, he's basically the one who is like saying, "We accept you, Gamora," at her crucial moment. And so and then they're in the Milano together practicing and showing each other moves by the end. I love that evolution. What I find interesting is we knew that we needed the evolution, but we didn't know exactly when and how. We just knew that, okay, in the beginning of the game it's like this, and in the end of the game it's like this. And then I had to be very conscious as the scripts for the chapters were coming in to say, wait a minute, we're right around the middle. Drax has to not be using murderous anymore. He has to change. And a lot of it was kind of, I mean, it was planned but not planned. It was like Kasper said, it was organic. We were like, I think it's working. I hope it's working, and catching it that way. So that was that one was one that had a lot of thought put into it. What I know there's others, but go ahead, Kasper. I want to hear your answer.
It's hard to pick your children, you know?
I mean, again, without getting into spoiler territory, but I mean, for me, my child in this game was, I felt like it was Nikki, and the Star-Lord Nikki relationship is one that, I really took to heart, and that was a big part of, for me, it was a big part of that kind of the emotional core of what Star-Lord was dealing with in this game. So every time I had a scene to write, depending on where we were, in what map and in what chapter, I didn't want Star-Lord to lose sense of his care and about the fate of this girl who he may or may not have some kind of more meaningful kind of relationship to. So just their development over time, and I love the elevator scene where Star-Lord is trapped inside an elevator with Corel and Nikki and having to choose sides while he himself is a prisoner with a lot to lose. And then so just kind of like keeping an eye on that as something that was driving the story forward in terms of caring about someone that isn't part of your core group, because the core group, I mean, they're together and sometimes they split away for a little bit, but we needed something outside of those characters in order to drive the motivations of why we're going to the places that we're going and why we're doing the things that we're doing. And Rocket doesn't at all agree with these motivations and these objectives. Star-Lord has these underlying reasons for why they're actually really, really important to him, but he's not quite ready to always voice it to the team. So for me, the whole Star-Lord Nikki relationship is one that I really meant a lot to me.
Yeah. And that one actually affects the Rocket relationship too, because a lot of Rocket's anger and jealousy is because he thinks he's being replaced.
Yeah, I love that about
I did not catch that. That puts everything into a new perspective. Why? Is it because she's short, or they're just short on beds?
She's short. She can fit into small spaces. She can hack things. I mean, she's
Gotcha.
Rocket without the attitude. So
she's Rocket, and Quill's gonna pick her over the team. That's his fear. So that the team's gonna break up.
I think one of the very first interactive banters that you have in the game is you're alone with Rocket and Groot in the quarantine zone. And Rocket is kind of reminiscing about the time when the group was just the three of them. He's someone that lets people into his inner circle very reluctantly. But I think at some point in their recent history, Rocket was okay with it being Rocket, Groot, and Star-Lord. He could get his head around that, and he could become emotionally invested in that, and then things kind of, in order for the team to fulfill its objectives as these galactic heroes for hire, they needed to bring in other members. And that's where Rocket, I think, starts to feel that sense of, it's not my group anymore, it's not people that I trust anymore. And then the idea that now there's other people out there that StarLord cares about as well, I think it really puts him on the defensive, and it brings out his sense of insecurity a lot. So
a pivotal scene in this game, and I'm sure that nobody wants to spoil or something or whatever. So let's just give a little bit of enough innuendo for the people who know the game. They'll get what you're saying. There is a hug that you have the ability to stop. And that's a very deep scene. And I realized that during that scene, you're seeing Star-Lord's perspective, but then after the fact, you get to kind of see you get to see what Drax is thinking, but never do you go into Gamora's brain or Rocket's brain. Was that always kind of like you always knew you weren't just going to skirt through everyone's subconscious? Did you always know that no, Drax is going to be the one that we're going to investigate?
Yes, because we knew it made sense from the story perspective that Drax was, you have to go into Drax's head because Drax is the only one who was unable to resist the promise. And so from just knowing that kind of, and because you can't make this massive, I mean, the game would have been way, way too big, and may not have been as coherent if we'd gone into everybody's. So we always knew that, but we also had to kind of understand what the other ones, what their promises was and why they were able to essentially break free of it. And so that was some of the, and there were many, many big discussions about that as we struggled to understand some of the characters and what their promise would have been.
We developed it in layers. I mean, the focus from the start was StarLord and making sure we got the StarLord arc right and the StarLord experience right. And absolutely, it was a huge challenge to understand. And it was, I think, I remember getting the feedback from Marvel where we really need to make sure that, in terms of thematic payoffs and, kind of crescendos emotionally, each character needed their moment. And so again, layers, organically finding the right places, the right maps, the right beats. I mean, it's easy to justify it now in retrospect, but there's something that I kind of almost like about not seeing Gamora's promise, where I think it feeds into her type of character, where she's the detached one, she's the mysterious one. We see kind of through numerous layers that, and walls that she puts up, we know she's going through something, but it's hard to know what it is. So I do kind of think in retrospect there's something almost more powerful about not having that experience as intimate as the one that we have with Drax. But like Mary said, there's 1,000 production reasons and story reasons, and it all has to fit together in the end.
I think it's much better that you went that way, because even if you went full on with Drax, but if you kind of half-assed it with 3 other people, it really would have watered down the sentimentality of it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
sometimes less is more. Just hearing the words of Rocket and what happened to him is a little better in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that scene, trying not to give the spoilers, but after
It's okay. I think
no, the scene where the team has to summon the Milano to come rescue them, and they've already been exposed to the promise, and they've been now being chased by the church. The scene where they're all together, and it's the first moment that they have to really talk about it, where and Peter says, "I saw my mom," etc. That was a moment in which it was really cool, because we really focused on they don't want to talk about it, and that helps you see how painful it is, and how just the look between Rocket and Groot just says everything. You don't need to hear, and you don't need to understand what Groot said, and you don't need anything. It's just that look tells you everything. And Rocket's reaction when to the blowing up the thing and how huffy he is, you just know that he's seen something that's hurt him, and that makes it even more powerful, I think. Not knowing, but knowing.
I think we did such a good job of making them so chatty throughout the rest of the game, that this one kind of map and this one sort of extended sequence where, you know, they don't have a lot to say, and I think that speaks volumes, and it really comes across that, you know, we may not know exactly what it is that each one is going through, but we know they're going through something. So yeah.
I remember not talking for like 4 hours once, and then my mom probably called the doctor. She was like, so, "He's broken. Something's wrong with him." I gotta say, the performances are great. I mean, not only do each character matter to the team in a playable way, like Groot is great at tying the bad guys up with a bunch of twigs and making bridges. Rocket being a hacker who could fit in small places. Drax just being a big tough guy. Gamora's one slash kills. But character wise, all of them have something to say, and they all have a distinct voice about them. It's kind of like having a team that's jazz, metal. Like if you were to compare them to music, and you as good as writing is, actors bring it to life too. I would
Absolutely.
love to hear your opinions, any stories about casting and the performances that these actors masterfully brought to this video game. Please tell me all about it.
I'll start with the casting scripts, which were interesting because the casting scripts were our attempt to find out who the characters were. And then when you actually see all these actors auditioning and using them, you're watching tons and tons. And the one I remember really vividly was John, StarLord, because I think it was that, again, I think Kasper wrote the audition script in which he's trying to sell the Guardians. In fact, we use some of the lines anyway, sometimes none of the casting scripts end up in the game, but different jokes or different things do get kind of stolen. But it was just this moment where it was this great dialogue where StarLord is saying, hey, he's trying to sell his team to a potential client. And the way John performed it was just like with this underlying sincerity that made you feel like this guy is there's a sincerity to him. He's a dreamer. He's a hopeful guy, even though he's trying to do this. And that's when we saw that audition, we were like, I was just like, yes, that's StarLord. And he was different than Chris Pratt too. He had a different flavor. And I think because John had that other flavor, it was able to bring out within the scripts that voice. So that's one of the strong memories that I have. The entire cast was just, this game wouldn't be as good as it was without that cast.
Any thoughts, Kasper, about these writing auditions where I'm sure you weren't allowed to tell anybody it was for Guardians of the Galaxy, so it was a little vague?
I mean, we had to disguise some of the terms and the character names and the references to space locations in a way that it was not Guardians of the Galaxy, but we needed to sell the tone and the spirit that we were going for. So, I mean, you can check with John when you speak to him. I secretly think that he figured it out.
Yeah, I think they'll do.
So I think that helped his audition a lot. I mean,
when you get the script, did anybody actually know what they were auditioning for? Did anyone key in that this was going to be a Guardians of the Galaxy game?
Yeah.
Do tell.
Maybe he'll lie, but I feel like he kind of read between the lines and he knew what he was auditioning for, and that really helped to sell his performance because, I think everyone that watched it, I mean, he got it right away. Mm-hmm. In terms of ones that stand out, I mean, Gamora was the challenge, and it's the one that I always think about the most because just from a writing perspective, I think for a lot of us, she was the hardest Guardian to write. Just by the fact that she's kind of the most reserved. There's no obvious hook about the way that Gamora speaks, the way that there is with Drax and his, literalness, Rocket and his constant snarkiness. There's something easy to attach to, and then you can develop from there. Gamora, there's nothing obvious to attach to right away. And we went through more than one person who auditioned for Gamora, and we tried them out for a while. For me personally, there was a lot of sense like I'm letting these actresses down because we know we haven't found her on the page yet. We know we haven't found her in the game yet. And so asking someone to then bring that character to life, well, it's impossible. It's an impossible endeavor. So from my perspective, just the way that Kimberly was able to come in and own the role and finally kind of validate that, yes, it took us much longer to find her,
Mm.
but in the end, I think we did, and I think her performance really helped to ensure that we did. So she's the one that really sticks out for me.
Amazing. Yeah, I just got to say graphic wise, the game came out so well, and it was it's really refreshing that I was telling this to Daryl before that it's really like every time a cutscene would happen in a video game, and I was playing something like Avengers Ultimate Alliance or something like that, it seemed like a cutscene was just whole other entity that was just coming in and kind of cutting half whatever you were doing. Here's a cutscene. Okay, stop everything. Put down your remote. Make sure you don't skip it. Just watch and experience. But I found in this game, there's so often the dialogue is happening when you're still kind of in charge of your movement. I mean, you're slowly deciding to move, and they're giving you all this plot devices, but at the same time, you don't feel this disconnect where even when a cutscene happens, you still kind of are in it. And that is an art in itself, and in my personal opinion, an achievement when it comes to video games, because even though I'm not good at them, I have been playing them for over 30 years, and I've never experienced that before. Even the little details where when a cutscene would finish, it would end on Peter's back, and then there you are again. So it almost seemed like a perfectly it would flow from one to the other, and like that's amazing. That is truly amazing. I find. Were you? I know you guys are coming from the writing, but were you impressed with how it all actually came together and how all the writing was, not only cherished and celebrated in the action, and usually the part where they're like, "Shut up, writers, button time."
Oh yeah. I mean, I think especially when you work on a game project, you're seeing it through various iterations. And for a long time, you have to hold in your head what it's going to be, because for a long time it does not look good and it does not play good. And it's just and you're seeing rough cuts of cinematics, and you're just like, oh my God, tell the cinematics team to hurry up the pacing, fix it, da, da, da. But when everybody just keeps working at their craft, and the cinematics team has amazing artists working for them, amazingly skilled craftspeople, and when they finally get it to the point, it seems like one moment it goes from, oh God, please, to, oh my God, that's amazing, and then it just lifts you up as you're working on production, and you're like, maybe there's something really cool going on here. So
Yeah, for me, it's one of the many moments of terror was when we first saw the cutscenes. For a writer, these scripts are our babies, and we hand them off at a certain point, and we don't know what's going to happen to them. And so when you start seeing the first cuts, it's not necessarily the way you imagined it. Sometimes little things get changed on the recording floor, and then you're, oh, it's you. So there are tons of terror from my perspective the first time as we were seeing it, but absolutely all credit to Daryl and his team, because by the end they knew what they were doing. They knew it was going to happen in iterations, and the final cuts of these scenes, they blow me away. I think they're beautiful and absolutely as good as anything that I've seen in our industry. So extremely impressed by our cinematics team.
Speaking as a fan, both of Guardians of the Galaxy, the movies and the game, and a fan of just geeky stuff in general, I can say that my people can be dicks about so many things, and hateful and judgmental. And when the game came out, I'm sure you guys were hearing, before it was even in production, I'm sure someone had opinions on something. And every time an image would come out, some people would have opinions on something. But masterfully, I'm seeing such positive reactions based on this game, and I think people respect what you all did so much because you decided to stand on your own and not just be a lousy movie adaptation or something like that. I think the route that StarLord is his own StarLord and Rocket is his own Rocket and Drax, etc., and the wonderful ability to explore backstories, and it's not just all about Infinity Stones and Thanos. And even though that's awesome in a movie sense, it's really kind of like, instead of just being second tier Marvel characters that they're giving a video game to, like the movies before it, Guardians of the Galaxy movies, no one saw this coming. No one saw something this good coming. When you work on something, you could literally see the duct tape. No matter what, no matter how long or how removed you are, you always can see the work. Are you able to appreciate the game now as a finished piece without thinking of the work that went into it?
I feel like Kasper answered that one.
I mean, I absolutely know the places where there's narrative duct tape, and I know the places where we ran out of duct tape, and it's something even less adhesive than duct tape that's just barely holding this thing together. So yeah, I mean, the kind of person that I am, I think I've watched every single Twitch streamer play the game, and I fast forward to the bits that I know are kind of broken, just to see if anyone else will notice that they're broken, or did we mask it just well enough. I mean, at the end of the day, it's impossible to be deaf to the positive reaction generally that's out there, that people have identified with these characters. There's something, I think, uplifting and wholesome about the experience of hanging out with this group of people that, yes, they bicker, but they love each other, and they're not afraid to kind of like bond together. So it's been a very positive kind of reaction, and for me, it all kind of comes back to we made the game with a lot of love. I knew very early on the kind of team we have, the way that we approach the projects that we work on. It's from a very honest, creative place where we're, what are the themes that interest us? What do we want to explore? What are the character dynamics that we think will work the best? Not that will, sell the best or make someone else happy, but that is compelling to us. And so early on, I knew, if nothing else, we were making something that, that had a soul, that was genuine, that was authentic. And then to see that now kind of, out there and people reacting positively to that, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Amazing. One of my favorite characters in this game is Cosmo, because I was not familiar with Cosmo, the character, before this game. I see that, like, as much fun as characters that have been in movies, but Guardians of the Galaxy has a rich history. There's a scene where they go on a computer and they're looking up criminal files to all these characters that aren't necessarily in the game, but you get to learn about through this universe's version of these characters. And there was these long bios, and I just remember spending about 30 minutes just reading, being so interested. And can you tell me about coming up with that, choosing to put that in, and yeah, please tell me about that.
We create a game in stages. We go through the process of, first we come up with a story, and and all the gameplay and all that, and we create a blueprint, and we kind of in the blueprint say, okay, well, at this point you're gonna get into this, and you can access the files, and by accessing the files, there's an important story point that's going to happen. So all we knew at the first was that existed for that very important story thing, but we knew you had to hide that story thing, among other things, all these criminal records and all this other stuff, and we didn't know what those would be or anything like that. So then you continue making the game, and then you get to a point where you're like, oh shoot, we got to write that stuff now. Who are the other characters who are the criminal files? And that's when we kind of talk a bit with Marvel, and we have some ideas, they have some ideas, and we settle on a certain group that we're going to do. And then at that point, it's me personally, I'm just handing it off to the writers and saying, okay, write these criminal bios. And the writers, all of these characters are Marvel characters, as you know. So a lot of it is getting familiar with the lore that Marvel, the existing lore, and then just kind of, as they're writing it, reworking it to fit our universe. And it's funny because the many, many years that I've worked in games, you're always aware that people don't want to read. People don't want to read. Everything has to be short. Keep it short. Keep it short. So when you're reviewing these, you're like, is anybody going to read this? Is anybody going to go through? So it's really fun to hear from you that you spent hours or reading and culling through these, because sometimes I think a lot of the fun writers do have a writing those kind of texts, knowing that maybe nobody will read it, but I'm gonna have fun writing it. So
No, I'm a nerd. I would probably read like I would read graffiti on the wall if it had an Easter egg in it. And speaking of when StarLord, aka Peter Quill, first wakes up, there's a Dazzler poster in his room, and my friend Cliff pointed that out right before I started playing the game. In fact, he reminded me to start playing the game today. He's like, "Hey, Marvel fans, rejoice! There's a Dazzler poster." I'm like, "Oh, cool, yeah," because Dazzler is like a pop star in the Marvel world, and that's really and referencing the X-Men, all that stuff. Did you have a lot to say at all in the background graphics happening, like the Last Starfighter poster and all that kind of stuff?
I think that okay, so a lot of that stuff came from multiple sources. It came from, like, in Peter's room, a lot of it was JF sitting down and saying, we should have something like this and this and this and this. It was the art team. I think the Dazzler poster was actually brought up by the art director, Bruno, or someone on his team was like, we have to get Marvel to give us Dazzler, because we weren't sure if they would let us use Dazzler. So I'm very, very happy when they did. And I think, like, for example, another thing, because we try and get everyone on the team involved, not just the writers, not just, the creative people. And I think when you go in Nowhere, if you go into the Emporium, the items that you can look at are all Marvel Easter eggs. And for that, we sent out an email to the team saying, hey guys, what would you like to see? And just now that the game is finished, one of the head tester sent me, he sent me an email, and he said, I was cleaning out my emails and I found this. And what it was he had sent me a list of all of the of what could be in there, and everything he had asked for ended up in there. And
nice.
so a lot of it came from him. He was like, thank you for making that happen. And I'm like, you're the one who did it. You're the one who came up with those ideas. So
amazing. So the game begins great. We've established that. And my goodness, what a great performance by the actress who played Peter Quill's mom. I mean, oh my God. But how do you know when the game ends? Like, you're writing, but it must be hard to write the end of a game. Like, it's going to end, but to end on the right note with the right intensity. Did it take a long time to kind of crack that nut? Because it must seem like such a burden to have like a great beginning, a great middle. Now we got to end strong. How do we do that? What have we not done yet? They talk to a freaking giant space. They talk to a Russian space dog. They fight a dragon. Like, well, how do we end this after that? What do we do?
Endings are hard.
Yeah. We've taken flack in the past for not always having the best endings in our game. So I mean, this is a joke, but I think the mindset was, let's give them 3 or 4 endings this time, and then they can't possibly be angry at us.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Endings are hard. There were a lot of debates. I think one thing I do remember is there are 3. Basically, at the end, there's 3 bosses that you end up having to defeat one at a time. One of which is not really a boss, but and we were constantly saying, which one should you defeat first, and should you actually defeat the last one at all? Should that be in there? And there's a lot of discussions and a lot of push and pull on that, and a lot of debates as to how it would be. And I think for that one, I think we looked to the creative director, JF Dugas, who he had his vision, and he knew when we posed different things, he knew what to do. And I think he kept insisting that we do it the way it ended up being, and he was right.
Excellent. We're going to go into a little bit of spoiler territories, ladies and gentlemen. Spoilers. So you're telling right now, you can't say, hey, because I'm like, literally, I'm looking at you right now. I'm telling you, if you haven't played this game, you can't bitch. I'm telling you, stop it. Stop playing this. Because I just got to ask you because we're here now, and no one can tell me about this but you guys. Um, there's this amazing scene where Peter has to tell Nikki that her mom that none of this is real, and this birthday party she's living in this fantasy, this loop, and it's some of the most amazing acting that I've ever seen in a video game. And someone had to come up with that, and I'm looking at them. So, tell me about crafting this scene that will make any person with a soul break, please.
It's all you, Casper.
Um, so yeah, I mean, the StarLord Nikki relationship is something I worked on a lot, and it was always somewhere in my mind that I knew that this was a big part of what is driving StarLord through this story. Um, right off the bat, the challenge with that scene and something I was incredibly conscious of was uh, the dangers of gamifying grief. Star-Lord and Nikki need to have this moment. Nikki needs to be pulled out of this. She needs, some very mature support from Star-Lord. It's an incredibly tense scene. I think all of us were very aware of that and conscious of that. I felt realistically confident that I could write the scene. I knew the characters. I knew the moment. I could write the scene. The challenge was bringing choice and consequence into it, giving the player options in the dialogue, and it is gamified to some extent, but trying to do that in a way that's not tacky, that's respectful to the emotional moment and the emotional integrity of what Nikki is going through. That for me was the big challenge. I still don't know the extent to which maybe it could have been better, maybe not, but that was what was most on my mind when tackling that scene. Was it's interactive, it's not a movie. Players need choices. They need to feel like they're a part of this. They're the ones driving this moment, but at the same time, just making sure that it's sincere and authentic. And when I first heard the performance that Nikki gave, I knew every word, I knew every line she was going to say, and it still breaks my heart hearing the way she says it, the frailty with which she allows herself to just be so, I don't know, so frail in that moment. And John gives an amazing performance as well. So that was sort of the way I approached that scene.
I was present there during the mocap shoot for that, and because sometimes part of my role during the mocap shoot is I'm there to make sure that the actors understand the script, to make sure that if there's lines that don't work, we can fix them and everything. So I'm kind of sitting in the corner. I think the actors think of me as a script supervisor from a movie set, but so I'm sitting in the corner of the mocap room, and they're performing that scene, and I'm just like, I'm bawling as I'm watching their performance, and I'm trying so hard not to let anybody see. And then I think at one point, as they finally finish, like Nikki Roman, the actress, looks and she sees me. She's like, "Oh my God, you're crying!" I'm like, it's okay. You guys are just so good." And I don't think I was the only one who was crying. I think on the sound booth there, everybody in there was just, the performance was so amazing from both Roman and John. They were great.
And really, like, looking back on it now, we have a few of these scenes that are much more emotionally charged in the game, and different writers worked on different scenes, and I feel like we knocked them out of the park. Like, I'm really proud of these scenes, but when I think about it now, the real art isn't the scene itself. It's all the stuff that led up to that moment in order to feel like that moment is earned. You can write a great scene between Star-Lord and Nikki, or Drax and Star-Lord, or whoever, but if everything in the game, the way that they interacted with each other, the dialogue that you had 3 chapters earlier, if it's not building that relationship up to a point where that scene is deserved, then no matter how well it's written, it's going to fall flat. And so for me, that's really where the art of what we do lies, is making sure that we earn those big moments.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I was even saying before that I loved Gamora's like through the huddles throughout the game. More and more and more, I loved hearing her get so much more stoked that they're having a huddle and they're fighting together. Like it was really refreshing to see her come out of her box. I gotta wonder that scene where Peter kind of cheers her up by singing to her and getting her to sing, and neither of them being particularly good at it. Was that who came up with that? Because that's a very cool scene.
That was one of the writers on the team. That was Stephanie. Stephanie did a lot of the writing for the Milano and kind of took charge of everything that was happening in all the Milanos. And she came to me and she's like, I really think we should do this. I mean, we're in this moment in the story where it's, where Gamora's not communicative, and shouldn't StarLord try and sing with her in order to do it? And I admit I was skeptical at first, but I was like, okay, go for it. Let's see what you come up with. And she did a great job at it. And it ends up, and we also knew when we looked at it, because who can sing and who can't sing is an important, on one way you can play the game based on one choice you make. You might need to know who can sing well and who can't sing well. I don't know if you actually played that version. If you you missed an entire puzzle.
This is the best part of this game. Like it's wonderful, the fact that this game will change that much.
So if I understand correctly, you did not hide the llama.
You hid the llama. You didn't hide the tech. So
yeah.
Team hide the tech.
Oh my God, team hide the tech. That's so cool.
So God, team hide the tech get what I'm talking about? If they hid the tech. Okay, if they hid the tech. Yes, because if you hid the tech, the escape route that you had at one point does not exist. So you end up having to do a puzzle that involves, well, I'm going to totally spoil. I'm spoiling it for you. I'm sorry, Ryan, but it involves the llama and the llama's love of music. And it involves getting all the guardians to having to sing. And some of them who sing, the llama can't stand their voice. And some the llama loves. And so when Stephanie, back to the scene with John with StarLord and Gamora, it was very much known that, okay, StarLord has to have a decent voice and Gamora has to really be bad. And if you get this, you'll see it. And the llama actually even reacts to their singing in that as a subtle clue for later, if that happens. So.
Both of these singing moments, they're examples of moments of just utter goofiness that I was 100% sure at some point in production, someone is going to cut this. It might be Mary, it might be JF, it might be Marvel, it might be Disney, it might be the lawyers. No way is this kind of stuff going to get through. And then just to the credit of everyone involved in this game, and yes, we had really talented writers, the entire group of them, and just, all of our quirkiness is in there. But somehow the quirkiness kept going through, and it just, people kept keeping it in. So it's wonderful to see.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for coming by, everybody. This has been so fun, so informative. But I gotta ask, just from a writing standpoint, and maybe it's a lot easier to enjoy someone else's work than your own. I know that's the case with me. Before we go, can you just tell me your top 3 favorite moments? And this game is full of moments, beautiful moments, both sad, both funny, both whatever. Can you tell me your top 3 favorite moments that you find came out not only the best, but that you enjoy the most?
It's so hard to limit it to 3.
Then do 6.
I mean, I of course love the moment with Drax that you mentioned earlier in Nowhere. Though I wouldn't say I loved it. It's a great scene. It's not my favorite if I had to really rank. I also love the Battle of Wits in the elevator with Nikki and her mom and Peter, just for the pure hilarity of that scene and all the different ways it can go. I love pretty much all the StarLord and Carell moments, and I love I will group the Carell Nikki moment at the end that into one big section. It's 2 different scenes, but they're so close together and they are so important to each other at the end game, the one we were talking about with Nikki, but more importantly when Carell shows up at that point. And of course, I think the Gamora moment where she reveals her secret is just amazing.
Yeah, especially when she just keeps punching and punching, and you're just like, "Wow, okay, this isn't a video game character. This is a this is a living person, and they're going through hell." What about you, Casper? Tell me your top 5,000 favorite moments.
I'll go with all the moments in the game where we undermine the Guardian request system. So for me as a writer, it's not just about writing scenes, but also just kind of working on the narrative cohesion and integrity of the game as a whole. And we have this system that in order to traverse certain obstacles and certain blockages, you use buttons to ask the Guardians to fulfill their tasks. So, Rocket go in the hole, Rocket hack the thing, Drax destroy the statue, whatever it may be. And it's the player's mechanic for advancing in the world. And very early on, I think there was a recognition among the team that, okay, this makes sense, the extent to which the Guardians are tools, but they're not just tools, they're also people. And depending on certain moments in the game, depending on where the character is emotionally, mentally, maybe Rocket doesn't want to go in the hole. Maybe Groot doesn't want to make the bridge. And so I think there's a splattering of these moments throughout the game where, the player's mechanic, everything you're taught to expect, you press the button, you ask Groot make the bridge, and Groot says, no, I can't do it because you didn't do the thing you have to do in order to get Rocket through the water. And to me, it's one of these little moments strung together to make a game where the characters are the priority, where it's a character-driven game. They're not just tools. You don't just use them any way you want. You have to be aware of who they are and what they want and what your relationship to them is at any given moment. So all these little moments where you expect them to say yes and they say no, those are I love those moments, and I think they help to make the game that we made.
Absolutely. In fact, what everything you're saying right now just kind of validates the love that I, as a player, had for these characters. Like, this is why, because you cared that much. You cared about them saying yes, but you cared even more about them saying no. I mean, seriously, like think back to Pong. Like, imagine Pong having emotional depth. Someone do that, actually. That's kind of funny. Something in the game that really stood out to me, and it was like about 2 o'clock in the morning. I had been playing for a while. I was just obsessed with Peter's flashbacks. Like in the beginning, just seeing that, discovering his mom right away, just talking about how she loved Black Sabbath. And then you open the door to go upstairs for your birthday cake, and all of a sudden you're in the future. So I'm like, maybe it'll come back. Then later on, you're walking around, and all of a sudden you're back in the basement. Same thing, you go there, but then you go upstairs. You talk to your mom. She's like, says something really amazing. Then you got to go upstairs to grab a present. Then all of a sudden, flashback over. Now, the person who likes story being slowly told to me and is very patient and likes that, I couldn't wait for this payoff because I know he's Bambi. I know something horrible is going to happen. So lo and behold, keep playing, and then here it is, the flashback I've been waiting for. You get the present. You see outside there is an alien invasion, and there's people coming from there's aliens coming from essentially everywhere, and there's a giant ship outside, and you got to get downstairs, and all of a sudden your guns work for the first time and you are running down the stairs, but instead of just kind of running down the stairs like a panic kid, all of a sudden you're cool, you're swooping down there, you're running outside, and you're like, I can save my mom. And you're shooting people and nothing is happening. And all of a sudden, these guns that you got so familiar with, seeing them evolve into different elemental things and being able to essentially solve problems like this in the game, all of a sudden are ineffective. And all of a sudden, you feel like this scared, helpless kid, and you're watching Peter Quill's Bambi moment unfold in front of him, and you're powerless to stop it. Now, that could have been fine and done, but you decide we're going to go back there and we're going with the promise. And all of a sudden, Peter is going to be a grown ass man who's good at fighting. And all of a sudden sees the alien invasion happening outside and jumps, not run down the stairs, jumps through the window. And all of a sudden is capable of actually saving her. And, I overkilled those bastards. I got to tell you, I'm like, after having seen that, I took my time. and, and then you're hugging your mom. And here is this person from the beginning of the game, from pushing start. Here's the person that you love and miss. And she's in your arms. but you know something's up. And slowly the shadows are coming in, and you know it's like by settling into this reality. First of all, it goes straight to credits, which is funny because you know it's like a fake ending. But given their ability to have to literally push a button to stop everything he's ever wanted, and being a player and having to actually physically push her off is astounding. And this is award worthy thought process, development, writing, gameplay, all of it. I've never in my life have ever been in the mindset of A, I have to do this, and B, had the ability to do this, as opposed to a cutscene that, like I said before, just does what it wants to do and you're just waiting to get through it because you have no power over it. The fact that you still have to get through it just to get through the game is one thing, but to physically actually have to do it is another. I gotta tell me everything and anything about the process of creating like an award-winning moment, in my opinion. Yeah.
Well, we knew when we were, I'll go straight back to the blueprint again. In the blueprint time, we knew that we wanted you to have to experience the death of the mother and to understand what Peter lost, because we knew that we would then present it to you in the promise as you can save her. And that was how we knew we had to get you as a player to understand the danger of the promise and the power of the promise. So with that, that's kind of knowing that we then had to kind of constantly go back to these scenes and build them up and take them a little further and take them a little further. All of that was done to make sure that you, I mean, it was like you had to know Meredith. You had to know Meredith Quill in this short amount of time. You had to have these really powerful, good moments with her. And I think, like, I mean, JF, I've heard JF say in interviews or just say his one directive was with that opening scene, you have to know that Peter Quill's mom is the coolest mom ever in that first moment, you know. And Dave was one of the writers. Dave handled all those scenes, and Dave did an amazing job. It was his first, he was brand new to the team, brand new to the project, and I threw him at that, and he was like, oh my God, you're gonna make me do these scenes. But he blew him out of the park. So so that all we knew. The pushing away part, that was, again, I remember very clearly Jeff being like, no, he wants the player to have to feel it and have to do it. And from my own, when I'm remembering like my own coming up with the story, it was my parents died several years ago within a month of each other. So, and I started this game several years after that. And I remember after my parents died, maybe 6 or 7 months after my parents died, having a dream in which I came down into my family kitchen and my dad was there. And I remember in this dream, like feeling both totally excited, but totally horrified and being like, no, don't do this to me. Don't do this to me, because I know I'm going to wake up and you're not going to be here. And that was one of the things like that also fed that idea of the promise, is knowing that how do we give you what you want the most, and yet you know you can't have it and you have to step away from it. And that's what we knew we had to present to the players.
Amazing. I also think it's a really good idea that when you are in Drax's head, you're not watching him prevent his family's murder. You're watching him live his life with his family. Yes. Which makes a lot of sense because it's kind of not redundant that way, actually.
Yes.
Like, yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, we're keeping that in because that's damn good. Right before we go, is there anything you want to say to the fans who, like I said, can be jerks, but at the same time have been very gracious, like myself, who just we love these characters, we love the take of these characters. All this version of them is so distinct to me and so precious to me that I'll look at the movie as a different entity, and I'm gonna hold back a little bit before watching it because I really want to keep the soul and the soul and the sentimentality between these particular versions of them fresh in my head as long as humanly possible. But now I'm actually going to go back and convince a llama to not come close to members because they can't sing, apparently. I'm going to check that out. But is there anything you want to say to the audience who has completely embraced this game into their hearts and minds?
Thank you. And I have to say, I mean, I'm so we spent so much. I mean, as Casper said, this was a labor of love for us, and to see the amount of love people are having for it is so wonderful. It's such a great feeling. I love knowing that people are enjoying it and having and getting stuff out of it. I love reading various comments where people are actually pointing out stuff I didn't even realize.
Such as?
Well, I'm not going to tell you because now it's all my ideas.
Okay, gotcha.
So I just can say, you know, thank you, enjoy it, and tell everybody else to play it. And I'm glad that you're enjoying it.
Awesome. What about you, Casper?
Team hide the tech.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for watching Ryan Stick Show. This has been great. Like I said before, we have interviews with some of the directors. We have interviews with some of the cast, and we have interviews with some of the writing team right here. This is awesome. I am so glad that this happened. Please subscribe to the channel, watch the other interviews, because everyone I've talked to thus far cares so much about this game, and their stories are incredible and not at all redundant, actually. So make sure you watch them all, because if you love things like I do and love special features and the making of and all this other stuff, then you will absolutely appreciate all the details and behind the scenes stories and emotions put into this game. So thank you very much for watching Ryan Stick Show. I'll see you next time.
Ryan Stick Show. It's the